Okay, and once we have knocked out the easy pages, now let's start working on more complex ones, and we're going to start with register page. Now, we'll do that in multiple steps. So there's going to be quite a few videos on register page, because I can honestly say that most likely this is going to be the hardest page. Since there's going to be auth, there's going to be toggling, we'll have to set up the slice for the user, and eventually we'll need to navigate away programmatically. So once we're done with the register, so once we get to the actual dashboard, it's going to be smooth sailing. Now there's really no other way. We do need to start with register, because the rest of the logic is going to depend on register or login, however you want to call it. So the page is register, but of course in here we'll have login or register functionality. So if we haven't logged in or registered the user, we cannot really set up any kind of data. As far as the setup, we'll have use state, use effect. So we'll have some state values over here. For register, there's going to be 3 of them. For a login, there's going to be 2 of them. We'll also get the logo component, which as you can see we display here on top of the form. And then also we have the wrapper. So this just gets the styling. Eventually, there's also going to be a Redux toolkit logic, because again, we'll set up the slice. We will set up some functions that asynchronously connect to the API and try to submit the data, because again, we want to register or log in the user. And if we're successful, we get that user back and then we'll store it in the slice. So all of that logic is coming up. And like I also said, if we're successful, we'll programmatically navigate away from this page. Now, first we'll start by setting up initial state, which essentially just reflects our inputs. So we have name, email, password, and is member by default is going to be true, but of course you can set it up as false, and we'll use state to set up this object. Now, can you set this up in the Redux toolkit in the user slice? Yes, of course, but it's always my preference to try to set up everything in local states as much as possible. Now, is it always possible? No. You'll see that in the upcoming pages, we will be setting up some input values in the actual slice. But whenever it's possible, I think it's more straightforward to have them in the local state instead, for a variety of reasons. Now, of course, keep in mind that this is a Redux Toolkit project. So, of course, there were situations where I picked the Redux state instead, just so we can get the practice. Hopefully that is clear. So we'll set up the initial state with values, set values, so our function, and we'll pass in our object, the one that we just set up. Then, like I said, there's going to be more logic, Redux Toolkit, and use navigate later. So for all of them, we'll have to set up handle change. So as we're typing, we want to change these values here in the state. Now, for the time being, we'll just grab the event and event target, just so we can see that everything works. And also there's going to be a placeholder for on submit. So once we submit the form, eventually there's going to be more logic. For the time being, let's just grab the event. Let's prevent the default. And again, let's log the target. And as far as the return, we're going to have a wrapper with a class of full page. Again, this is a global class. And in the wrapper, we have all the styles. We have the form. And I believe that this form also is a global class. Basically, yes, there are some styles in the wrapper, but this one comes from the index CSS. We have on submit. So once we submit the form, we invoke the placeholder. Then we have the logo, we have the login, and then we'll have a form row, which in the next video will turn into a separate component. And of course, I'll talk about the reasons once we get there. And when it comes to form row, again, we have the class, we have the label. In here, this is hard-coded for now, but it's not going to be the case. We have the name. So in this case, of course, I'm trying to showcase this input, which eventually will toggle. And we also have the input. So type text value will match the state value of values.name. And as far as the name of the input, well, again, for time being, we'll hard code that as name. we need to set up on change since I want to set up controlled inputs, and we'll set this one equal to handle change. And then we'll have class name equals to form input. Again, this just adds the styling. And for the time being, we'll add the button, submit button. So we won't have the toggle functionality yet, with some classes as well as the text.